Welcome to On the Couch, the show where we talk about any and everything. And today we're going to look at the subject of pregnancy, but not in the typical sense. Unfortunately, sometimes things go terribly wrong. Often when we think of maternity, we think of that expectant mother on the front of a magazine, smiling jubilantly and an equally ecstatic baby. But the journey sometimes is not all a bed of roses. We often see women, couples, and families left to deal with their challenges in isolation, in silence. However, today, Aisha is willing to share her journey with us and to let you know that at the end of pain, there is light, there is restoration, and there is healing. So when we come back after the break, we'll have a chance to talk with her. But just so you know, we are here with Aisha, and Aisha, such a pleasure to meet you. And we're going to be looking at just a situation in your life which was a tough journey, but I'm sure it will show others that you can overcome. Let's start several years ago when you first found out you were pregnant. What was the experience like? What were your emotions?
Sure, I was completely excited. I remember saying, oh my gosh, I cannot even believe I'm pregnant. At the end of the day, though, it was a bit bittersweet because as a young Christian, even though you are saved, you don't necessarily stay away from sex.
Understand.
And I remember talking to my sister Desiree in Trinidad, and she was just as ecstatic as I was initially. And I said, you know what, God bless me with this child, and if my sister can be happy for me, I'm going to be just as happy for myself.
Did you have an easy pregnancy up until that stage?
Yes, I would say I did. I did not have any complications whatsoever. Even the morning sickness, I did not have.
Wow, lucky woman.
Yes, I just remember a little bit of, feeling vomiting, so to speak, when I would brush my teeth on mornings. But other than that, I did not have any complications. I had a pretty healthy pregnancy.
Okay. So when did things go wrong? What happened?
Well, the morning of the day I found out that my baby was dead, I remember feeling the Braxton Hicks still, feeling the contractions still, but I didn't feel the baby move around as much. I remember the doctor telling me that, at this time in the pregnancy, there isn't much room for the baby to move around. So you really wouldn't get that the child is going to move around that much. But I still felt the baby feeling a bit loose. In other words, the movements of the body were just kind of fluid, more fluid than usual. I did not panic, however, because I had a doctor's appointment scheduled for that same day.
Okay.
And so I got ready, went to the doctor, and during the meeting, I casually mentioned to him, Doc, I didn't really feel the baby move around much today. And he said, but Aisha, don't worry about that. That is normal at this time because there isn't a lot of room, so don't panic. I remember us going into the waiting room, and he helped me up to the monitor as normal. And
This is to hear the baby's heartbeat.
This is to hear the baby's heartbeat. And I remember seeing the hearts very still. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, something is wrong. But it wasn't that something was wrong with the baby. It was that something was wrong with the monitor. And I like to kick the monitor because I'm like, electricity, something isn't right. And at that point of realizing what was happening, it was complete silence in the room. I was silent, my boyfriend was silent, the doctor was silent, and then he broke the silence because he started to stutter a little bit. And he was like, but this can't be right. What is going on here? So I was like, but in my head I'm like, if her baby's heart is not beating, the baby must be dead because the baby can't live. The baby, so even though it's fairly straightforward, at that point in time you just go into panic mode instantly because you cannot believe it.
Wow. So when you went to sleep the night before, everything was fine up until that point?
Yes, I remember going to sleep and I still felt the baby moving around. And I remember when I woke up in the morning, I still felt full. Now, usually when you eat, obviously the baby eats as well. So in the morning I was like, well, why am I still feeling full? And the baby is moving around. So that night when I went to sleep, the baby was
I can imagine. What was your range of emotions during all of this? Because obviously it's a whirlwind of things happening in a short space of time.
I'm only crying non-stop. I remember walking with my bags to the hospital, and I'm seeing people that I know. And they're like, oh, you're going in to have the baby. And just they're seeing the pain on my face, and they're not understanding. But at that point in time, I couldn't stop and explain to them.
Yeah.
I just walked to the hospital. By the time I got into the room and I checked in, it was non-stop crying.
So you were expected to deliver the baby as a normal baby?
Yes, that is correct. When I actually got into the bed, I was telling the nurse, I would prefer to have a C-section. Just cut this baby out and let me go home. Because in my mind, I'm thinking this baby has died, they're going to poison my blood. I probably will soon die too. And it's best to get the baby out as soon as possible. I did not want to induce labor. I wanted to get the baby out as soon as possible. I remember the nurse saying, you know what, it's best for you to deliver this child naturally, because to have an emotional scar from a stillbirth as well as a physical scar from a C-section is going to be twice as hard.
That is so true. And on that note, it is interesting to note that there are actually 25% of those who are pregnant that unfortunately experience miscarriages, whether it be early in the process or late, resulting in stillbirths, and equally as tragic at either stage of the process. But when we come back, we're going to continue chatting with Aisha and tell you a bit more.
This episode is brought to you by Design Central Studio, Barbados Real Estate, Empire Media Limited.
Now, I gather that your sister would have been pregnant at the same time, and she was now coming down to the funeral with a new baby. How do you deal with that one?
Sure that you have to have some awesome faith. I remember telling myself I'm not going to touch any newborns for the rest of my life. And there was this one night, my sister, she was a month ahead of me in terms of her pregnancy, so she had just had her newborn. His name was Angel, and she was crying the entire night. She would not calm down. My mom tried to comfort her, my sister tried to comfort her, and she was still crying the entire night. And I remember running an errand. I came back home, I washed my hands, and I took the baby. And from the time we rested her on my shoulder, she stopped crying instantly and went off to sleep. And God was basically telling me, these children are innocent, so you can't really hold it against them.
Right.
And she was comforting me as well. Yes. She put her little arms around me, and she went right off to sleep. And I cried again because I couldn't believe that she had stopped crying. My mom was saying she wanted to hold her auntie and nobody else.
Now, do you want to risk having more children? Because sometimes in light of circumstances like this, people are, determined that that's it, they're done. I'm not taking any more risks. What is
I have heard of persons taking that stance, to each his own. But for me personally, I love kids and I want to have my own kids. Because having 11 godchildren is great. It's fantastic. But there's nothing like having your own kid.
Yes.
And I think that my next pregnancy, knowing that God is in control, I don't think I'm doing it.
Wow.
And anyways, leave it up to him.
What do you have to say to people who have been through challenging situations, whether it be postpartum depression, challenges with kids born with disabilities, or even in the instance of stillbirth and miscarriage? Is there hope? How can you overcome this? What is your advice?
My advice is 3 things. First off, you need to have a closer relationship with God. God shows you that He has a bigger plan for you, and He orders your steps.
So you're not angry with Him?
No, I am not. I question Him a lot,
okay.
But I am not angry with Him because He knows what He had in store for me, and He put those steps in place. Because as you know, my relationship did not work out at the end of the day with who I thought was my husband.
Okay.
Another thing, the second part of that is to have a support group. The same national systems for knowing and sharing with women who might feel the same thing. It puts things in perspective, and it also makes you, it also comforts you to know that it isn't just you. Usually when these things happen, you suffer in silence, there's isolation, and you think that there's no hope. But having these women around, it really does help. And the third thing is time does heal. Time does heal.
Yes.
The first anniversary was particularly,
I can imagine,
horrible. because you're going through everything that happened the year before. Baby would have been celebrating their first year, and you go through everything that happened from the time you went to be doctor, from the time baby died and buried. You go through everything again, and it's just as traumatic as if it happened yesterday. But time does heal.
Aisha, thank you so much. I know that this would have been challenging and not something that everyone is capable of doing, but I know this would have given hope to somebody else. And I think one of the main things that you have to remember as well, what happened, but it is not your fault. And sometimes people feel so guilty that it is tough. Yeah, it's tough to move on. But thank you so much for sharing, and hopefully it turns out to be, a savior for somebody else. Folks, there you have it. This is On the Couch. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.